The knife hit the table, vibrating between her fingers and the wine list. Not a threat, but a period. A final punctuation to the sentence the maitre d' had been too terrified to finish. This was his asterisk table, his permanent seat of power in a city that bowed to him. Melissa finally looked up, meeting the eyes of the man they called the king, and with a smile that held no apology, she took a slow sip of her water. She wasn't moving. That single act of defiance, in front of his entire crew and the city's corrupt elite, did something no bullet or betrayal ever had. It got under his skin. Melissa Cruz was an investigative journalist, not a cartel wife. She was there for a story on money laundering through high-end cuisine. She didn't know the man's name was Rafael Varga, or that his obsession began not with her beauty, but with her breathtaking, suicidal disrespect. And by the time the main course arrived, she had already crossed a line from which there was no walking back. For Melissa, this was just the latest in a long line of calculated risks. Her entire career was built on walking into rooms where she wasn't welcome and asking questions that could get her killed. Her focus was a financial pipeline known as the Gourmet Gateway. Cartels, particularly the Varga organization based in Medellin, were funneling billions in drug profits through a network of exclusive restaurants and gourmet food import companies. The money would purchase overpriced truffles, rare wines, and artisanal ingredients, then be resold through legitimate distributors, emerging clean on the other side. La Perla, this restaurant, was the crown jewel of the operation. Getting a reservation was her first break in 6 months. She used a borrowed identity from a source inside the financial crimes unit. The plan was simple: observe, note the faces, the routines, the flow of staff who weren't really staff. She never expected to walk into the lion's den and accidentally steal the lion's favorite chair. The silence that followed her refusal to move was thicker than the steak on his plate. His men, 4 of them at nearby tables, had gone statue, still, hands drifting toward unseen weapons. The maitre d' looked like he might faint. Rafael Vargas simply tilted his head, as if examining a fascinating, mildly inconvenient insect. He was younger than she'd imagined from the grainy surveillance photos. Early 30s, with the disciplined posture of a soldier and eyes that held a terrifying, patient calm. This was not a hot-headed brute. This was a CEO of violence. "You are in my seat," he said, his voice low, accented, and devoid of all emotion. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement of cosmic law. Melissa's heart was a war drum in her chest, but her voice, when it came, was steady. There was no name on it. "In my country, an empty seat is an open invitation." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. "Your country," he repeated softly. "You are a long way from home, it seems." He snapped his fingers once. A waiter materialized, trembling. "Bring another chair for the lady. She has joined me for dinner." It wasn't a request. The command hung in the air. To refuse now would be a second, potentially fatal insult. To accept was to step onto his chessboard. Melissa calculated the exit routes, the distance to the door, the 4 armed obstacles in her path. The story. It always came back to the story. This was access no journalist had ever gotten. This was the heart of the Gourmet Gateway, offering her a seat. With a nod that felt like signing a dangerous contract, she sat. The dinner that followed was a surreal dance. He asked polite questions about her cover story, a freelance food writer from Miami. He recommended the sea bass. He spoke about wine vintages with a connoisseur's ease, all while his gaze never fully released her, studying her hands, her reactions, the slight tremor she couldn't quite hide when a text buzzed in her purse from her editor. Status. She was dining with a man responsible for thousands of deaths, a man who had politicians and police chiefs on his payroll, and he was critiquing the sommelier's choice of Pinot Noir. But here's the thing about predators, they're also detectives. Halfway through the main course, he set his fork down with a precise click. "Your accent," he said, "it is not Miami, it is Boston, and your watch, a 5-year-old model. A food writer for Culinary Horizons would wear the new one, it is a prop." The air left the room. Melissa's cover, painstakingly built over weeks, evaporated in 10 seconds. He leaned forward, the candlelight carving shadows into his face. "So, who are you really? And why do you wish to die at my table tonight?" This was the precipice. Lie and he'd know, tell any version of the truth, and she was dead. She met his stare, the defiance that got her into this, now the only currency she had left. "My name is Melissa Cruz, I'm a journalist. And I'm here because the sea bass is allegedly financed with cocaine money. She expected the gun to come out then, the rage, the end. Instead, Rafael Varga began to laugh, a quiet, genuine laugh of sheer astonishment. He looked at his capo, Matteo, a mountain of a man with scarred knuckles, and shook his head in disbelief. "A journalist," he said, as if announcing a unicorn in the restaurant, "at my table, asking about my books." He stood up and everyone in the restaurant flinched. He walked around the table and pulled out her chair. "Walk with me, Miss Cruz." It was the most dangerous invitation of her life. With 4 of his men forming a perimeter, he led her not to a back room for execution, but to the restaurant's private rooftop garden overlooking the city's sparkling skyline. He lit a cigar, offering her one. She declined. "You have courage," he said, blowing smoke into the night. "Or stupidity. Usually they are the same thing. You wanted to see the money. I will show you more than money. I will show you the kingdom you so boldly walked into." He pointed with his cigar to the lights below. That building, the import license for every Japanese Wagyu in the country. That one, the distribution for the wines. The dock lights you see, they bring in my coffee, my fish, my flowers, all of it mine. You think you are investigating a crime, Melissa Cruz? You are not. You are auditing an empire. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I could have you killed tonight. It would be easy, but you interest me. You are a mouse who roared at the cat, so I make you an offer. You have 3 days, ask your questions, follow your money trails, and in 3 days you will have dinner with me again and tell me what you found. If your work is competent, you may leave with your life and your story." It was a game, a monstrous, egotistical game. He was giving her a head start, confident she could never find anything he hadn't already buried, just to see how far she could run. To prove his power was absolute. Her editor would tell her to run to get on the first plane out. But the story was here, pulsating in the night air around this man. The biggest story of her life, with a 3-day expiration date. She looked from the glittering web of his empire below, back to his expectant face. "And if I find something you don't want found?" Rafael Vargas smiled, the first real, full smile she'd seen, and it was more terrifying than any scowl. "Then, Miss Cruz, we will have a much more interesting conversation." He handed her a simple black business card, no name, just a phone number embossed in silver. "My direct line, for when you are ready to admit what I already know." He left her there on the rooftop, the city his witness, the clock now ticking in her veins. She had just traded her life for a 72-hour investigative window into the most dangerous criminal organization in the hemisphere. And as she looked at the phone number in her hand, she realized the terrifying truth. Rafael Varga wasn't just the subject of her story anymore. He had become her patron, her publisher, and her potential executioner, and he was waiting for her call. The first 24 hours were a blur of paranoid energy. Melissa worked from a secure laptop in a different hotel every night, using burner phones to contact her few trusted sources. She compiled every scrap of data she had on La Perla and the Gourmet Gateway. She mapped shell companies, cross-referenced luxury food shipments with known Varga cargo routes, and found the pattern. It was brilliant in its simplicity. A shipment of premium organic coffee would be declared at 10 times its market value. The overpayment, clean money from a front company, would be wired to the cartel's Colombian accounts. The coffee itself was sold at a loss, but the profit was already safely laundered and overseas. She had the mechanism. On the morning of the second day, the first crack appeared. Her primary source inside the Financial Crimes Unit, a weary analyst named David, missed their scheduled call. When she tried his direct line, it was disconnected. A call to the main office was met with cold bureaucracy. "Agent Miller is no longer with this division." No further explanation. Her blood ran cold. Coincidence was a luxury she couldn't afford. Varga was making his move, or someone else was. She was being isolated. Driven by a spike of fear, she dug deeper into the personnel. Who owned the front companies? The names were meaningless, but one address kept appearing, a sleek office tower downtown. The listed tenant was a venture capital firm called Aura Holdings, standard corporate camouflage. But when she pulled the building's security contract, her screen flickered. The provider was Sentinel Security, a subsidiary of a larger conglomerate. And the majority shareholder of that conglomerate was a name that made her stomach drop: Isabel Varga, Rafael's younger sister. The empire wasn't just run by one man, it was a family enterprise. Isabel, according to fragmented intelligence reports, handled the legitimate face, the The security firms, the property holdings, the political lobbying. Raphael commanded the traditional, violent side of the business, but this information was supposed to be buried, known only to a handful of agents at the highest levels. The fact that David had accessed it right before vanishing was not a coincidence. It was a flare. She decided to risk a physical recon. The office tower for Aura Holdings. Dressed in a delivery uniform, she entered the lobby, a monument to glass and cold light. Her goal was simple: get a look at the directory, see the comings and goings. But as she pretended to fumble with a package, she saw him, Raphael Varga. Not in the shadows of a restaurant, but here, in the harsh fluorescence of the corporate world, wearing a tailored navy suit, talking calmly with two men who had lawyer written all over them. He was conducting business in the heart of his own sanitized empire. He turned as if feeling the weight of her stare. Their eyes locked across the polished floor. There was no surprise in his gaze, only a mild, unsettling curiosity, as if he'd been expecting her. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, then returned to his conversation. The message was clear: I see you, keep digging. It was a psychological game far more sophisticated than any threat. He was allowing her to see the machine, confident she could never stop it. Shaken, she retreated to a cramped internet cafe. She had to warn someone. She drafted an encrypted email to her editor, attaching all her findings, naming Isabel Varga, outlining the security company link. It was the nuclear option. As she hit send, the screen froze. Then a new chat window popped up on her screen, unsolicited. A single line of text appeared: "The coffee is bitter, stop tasting it." The message dissolved 3 seconds later, leaving no trace. They were in her machine. They had been the whole time. Her investigation was a sham. He'd given her 3 days not as a challenge, but as a performance. He was watching her every digital move, amused by her efforts. The revelation was a gut punch. She wasn't a journalist hunting a story, she was a mouse in a maze, and the scientist was taking notes. The rage that followed was pure, burning fuel. She erased everything, smashed the burner phone, and walked out into the rain-soaked street with one reckless thought: if he wanted a show, she'd give him one he couldn't control. She went old school: paper, payphones, face-to-face meetings in crowded public places. She tracked down a former accountant for one of the shell companies, a man named Ernesto who had retired early to a quiet suburb, clearly bought into silence. She found him watering his roses, a picture of peaceful retirement. When she mentioned Aura Holdings, the color drained from his face. "You need to leave," he whispered, his eyes darting to the street. "They let people see what they want them to see. The coffee, the wine, it is just the perfume. The real money is in the boxes it ships in." The boxes, the shipping containers. Her mind raced. What was more valuable than overpriced gourmet food? She spent the last 12 hours of her deadline in the public library, scouring obscure trade databases and customs manifests. She compared the weight declarations for shipments of artisanal sea salt from Sicily with the maximum cargo weight of the containers listed. The numbers didn't add up. The declared goods were too light. The containers were shipping heavy. As in, very heavy. And then she found it, buried in a footnote of a European Union trade report on non-traditional mineral imports. A reference to a rare, extraordinarily dense clay found only in a remote part of the Andes. A clay that, when processed, was a key component in a new generation of stealth aircraft coatings and satellite armor, a militarily strategic material. The report noted its recent appearance on the black market, sourced through informal South American channels. The pieces slammed together with terrifying force. The gourmet gateway wasn't just for money laundering, it was a smuggling route for a next-generation weaponizable mineral. The food was the cover story. The dirt in the shipping containers was the real billion-dollar cargo. Raphael Varga wasn't just a drug lord. He had diversified into geopolitical weapons trafficking. This wasn't a story about crime anymore. It was a story about national security, and she had 45 minutes until she was supposed to call him and report her findings. She held a truth that could get her disappeared by cartels, intelligence agencies, or both. The black business card with his number felt like a live wire in her pocket. He expected her to admit defeat, to be chastened by his superior power. He did not expect her to have found the one secret that could actually threaten him. Making that call now wasn't just dangerous. It was a potential death sentence, but not making it was an admission of fear he would exploit. As the clock ticked down to 0, Melissa Cruz picked up a payphone, the receiver cold and heavy in her hand. She dialed the number, each digit a hammer strike in the quiet booth. It rang once. He answered on the second ring. "Miss Cruz, I was beginning to think you would be late." His voice was calm, almost amused. "I found it," she said, the words tasting like ash. "The clay, the mineral, you're not laundering money, you're trafficking weapons components." There was a long silence on the line. Then he spoke, and his tone was no longer amused. It was analytical. "Come to the restaurant, now, and for your sake, tell no one else." The command was absolute. This time when she entered La Perla, it was empty. No staff, no other diners, just Rafael Varga at his table and Mateo standing like a sentinel by the kitchen door. Rafael didn't stand. He gestured to the chair opposite. "Sit, explain your theory." She laid it out, the weight discrepancies, the trade report, the strategic value of the Andean clay. He listened without interruption, his fingers steepled. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "Competent," he said. "But incomplete. You see the what. You do not see the who or the why. The clay does not belong to me." The statement hung in the air. "It's your route, your ships." "My route, yes, a client's product. A very demanding, well-funded client who does not like attention." He leaned forward. "Your agent Miller, he did not vanish because of me. My sister alerted me he was poking where he should not. I had him relocated for his own safety. The people we are dealing with, they do not ask questions before they clean up problems. You have just made yourself a very bright, very noisy problem." The ground shifted beneath her. He was protecting his business from exposure, but he was also implying a threat greater than himself. "Who is the client?" she asked. "A consortium, European industrialists with ties to Eastern military interests. They pay a premium for discretion. My role is logistics. My sister handles the client relationship. She believes this is our future, beyond cocaine, beyond petty politics." He said the last part with a twist of disdain. "I have spent a decade building something that cannot be toppled by a drug seizure or a rival's bullet. This mineral, it is part of that. And you, a journalist with a deadline, have lit a match next to a powder keg." He stood and walked to the window. "You have two choices. You can leave tonight. I will have Mateo drive you to the airport. You will board a plane and you will never return. You will forget my name, this restaurant, and the clay. Your source, Miller, will be quietly reinstated elsewhere. This is the safe choice." He turned to look at her. "Or you can stay, you can see the full picture. And you can write a story that is not about a cartel, but about a global pipeline of corruption that makes my former business look like a schoolyard fight. But if you choose this, you step into the maze with me, and there is no walking away." It was the ultimate gambit. He was offering her the real story, the one that mattered, but at the cost of any pretense of objectivity. She would become embedded in his world. "Why would you offer me that?" "Because you are persistent, because you are not afraid of me, and because," he said, his voice dropping, "the people on the other end of this deal, they should be afraid. They think they can buy my network and my silence. I do not like to be owned." A well-timed story in the right international press could apply diplomatic pressure. It could make their venture untenable. "My roots remain valuable. They take the fall." He wasn't just a criminal. He was a strategist playing a multi-level game, using her journalism as a weapon in a corporate war. The arrogance was staggering. The danger was absolute. But the story, it was everything she'd ever wanted. To expose not just a crime, but a system. "I'd need access, real access, to your sister's records, to the shipping manifests, unfiltered. You will have a guide. Mateo will be your shadow. He will get you what you need and keep you alive. For as long as your work is useful to me. And when it's done, then we renegotiate." His smile was back, all sharp edges. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Cruz?" She felt the line between journalist and accomplice blur, then vanish. She nodded. The deal was struck. The next week was a descent into a looking-glass world. Mateo, the silent brute, proved to be a terrifyingly efficient facilitator. He provided encrypted files from Isabel's servers, contracts, communications, bank transfers. The client was a shell within a shell, but the money trail led to a private aerospace firm in Brussels with rumored ties to a foreign intelligence service. The scale was billions. Melissa worked from a secure apartment Rafael provided, her articles taking shape. But the closer she got, the more she felt other eyes. Her encrypted drafts were accessed by unknown parties. A car followed her for 3 blocks before Mateo intercepted it. The pressure was mounting from the other side. Raphael's warning was real. The breaking point came when she uncovered a secondary shipping route, one not even Mateo had given her. It used diplomatic pouches from a small European embassy. This wasn't just corporate espionage, it was state-sponsored. She confronted Raphael. "Your clients are using diplomatic cover. This is an intelligence operation. You're working for a foreign government." For the first time, she saw genuine surprise, then cold fury cross his face. He hadn't known. Isabel had kept this layer from him. The sibling partnership had a crack. "This changes nothing," he said, but his voice was tight. "It changes everything. If I publish this, it's not a business scandal. It's an international incident. They won't just buy you off or threaten you. They'll erase you and me." That night, the safe house was attacked, not by rivals, but by a professional military-style team. Mateo fought them off, but barely. As they fled through back alleys, Raphael's voice was tense over the phone. "Isabel has made a separate peace. She is trying to secure the client by eliminating the liability, me and you." The betrayal was from within. The empire was at war with itself. Melissa, Raphael, and Mateo were now fugitives from both the cartel and the shadowy client. They regrouped in a dusty safe house on the city's outskirts. Raphael paced, the polished king reduced to a cornered animal. "We need leverage, something she cannot ignore." Melissa looked at the files scattered on the table. She had the story, but she needed proof that would force Isabel's hand, something that would make the client drop her. And then she saw it, a scanned signature on a freight contract, not Isabel's, the client's representative, a name she recognized from a diplomatic roster photo from 2 years prior. "I have it," she whispered. The client name, not a company, a person, a sitting attaché at the embassy. "If we expose him, his government disavows him. The deal collapses. Isabel has nothing to sell." Raphael looked at her, a new respect in his eyes. "How do we expose him?" "We don't," she said, a dangerous plan crystallizing. "We tell Isabel we will. We give her a choice: sever the deal, shut down the route, or we send the story with the attaché's name to every major intelligence agency in the world. Her legitimate empire burns with her criminal one. She will call your bluff." "It's not a bluff." Melissa held his gaze. "I'm a journalist. This is what I do, but you need to be ready. When this story breaks, your world changes forever." Rafael Vargas studied the woman who had dismantled his operation, turned his sister against him, and now held the only key to his survival. He nodded slowly. "Then we send the message." The mouse was no longer running the maze. She was redesigning it, and the cat had no choice but to follow. The message was sent not as a threat, but as a transaction. Melissa drafted the full exposé, attaching the damning freight contract with the attaché's signature. The subject line was simple: the price of silence. It went to Isabel Vargas' most secure inbox, with a 24-hour clock on the header. The response came in 12. A meeting location, a neutral corporate boardroom in a building owned by neither sibling. The stakes were the future of the Varga empire. Melissa walked in with Raphael at her side, Mateo a step behind. Isabel was already there, flanked by 2 severe lawyers, not soldiers. She was Raphael's mirror in elegance, but colder, her anger ice rather than fire. "You would burn everything we built for a headline," she stated, her voice clipped. "You were ready to burn him," Melissa replied, nodding to Raphael. "You chose new partners. We're giving you a chance to choose your family again. Shut down the clay route. Cut ties with the attaché. The story about the gourmet gateway money laundering will still run. It will be a financial scandal for you, not a geopolitical one. You survive, legally bruised but free. The alternative is war with your brother and exposure as a traitorous weapons dealer to governments who will not be merciful." Isabel's eyes flicked to Raphael. "You trust this woman to control the narrative?" Raphael's answer was quiet. "I trust her more than I trust you right now, Hermana. She sees the whole board. You only saw the profit." The familial betrayal hung heavy in the air. After an hour of tense negotiation, the deal was struck. The clay route would be dormant within 48 hours. A business dispute with the European clients would be cited. Isabel would retain control of the legitimate holdings, but Raphael would regain oversight of all international logistics. A fragile, armed truce. Melissa published the story 48 hours later. not with a local paper, but through a coordinated international release with the Global Investigative Network. The headline was seismic: The Gourmet Gateway, How a Cartel's Food Empire Laundered a Fortune. It named shell companies, detailed the methods, and highlighted the suspicious venture capital influx from Aura Holdings. It did not mention the Andean clay. It did not name the attaché. It was the story she'd originally sought, but its publication was now a carefully calibrated weapon in a family ceasefire. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Regulatory agencies in 3 countries launched investigations. La Perla was shuttered for financial irregularities. Isabel's legitimate holdings took a massive stock hit, but she survived, fighting legal battles instead of gang wars. The European attaché was quietly recalled to his home country, his career in ashes. The weapons pipeline was dead. For Melissa, the professional triumph was dizzying. She won awards. She was offered a book deal, but the personal cost was a shadow she carried. Agent Miller was found, as Raphael promised, reassigned to a desk job in another state, scared but alive. Her editor celebrated the scoop, but quietly noted she'd operated outside all protocol, with sources she could never name. She was both celebrated and sidelined, a hero too dangerous to fully embrace. And Raphael, his world had been fundamentally altered. The near betrayal by his sister forced a reckoning. The brute force drug trade was becoming obsolete, targeted by drones and data. The future was in the gray spaces between nations and industries, a world of influence and information. He began the painful, violent process of dismantling the old cartel structures, converting them into a decentralized network of logistics and security services. He was becoming something new, a power broker, not just a kingpin. 3 months after the story broke, he requested a meeting, not at a restaurant, but at a public park. He sat on a bench, looking out of place in his casual wear. The story was fair, he said without preamble. It caused problems, useful problems. It forced a modernization. Is that why you asked me here? To thank me for modernizing your criminal enterprise? Melissa asked, the old defiance still there, but tempered now by shared experience. No, I asked you here to offer you a job. He let the absurdity hang in the air before continuing. Not with me. For you, I am creating a foundation. It will fund investigative journalism into government corruption and corporate crimes in this region. The board will be independent. I will be a silent donor. You would be its director. You would choose the stories. It was the most surprising move of all. He wasn't trying to own her or silence her. He was trying to institutionalize her, to weaponize the very thing that had nearly destroyed him. Why? Because the world is full of attachés and Isabels, he said, his gaze sharp. People in suits who think they are above the law. They are more dangerous than men with guns. You proved you can find them. I can fund the hunt. Think of it as redirecting resources. She refused, of course. The conflict of interest was astronomical, but the offer lingered, a testament to how thoroughly they had changed each other. He had shown her the brutal architecture of power. She had shown him the transformative power of truth. The final chapter was written a year later. Melissa's book, The Empty Chair, was published. It told the story of the Gourmet Gateway, but woven through it was a deeper, more personal narrative about power, obsession, and the lines we cross for truth. In it, she never named Rafael Varga directly. He was a shadow, a force of nature referred to as the architect. The book ended not with his arrest or death, but with his evolution and hers. It became a bestseller. On the day of its publication, a package arrived at her new apartment, sent by international courier. No return address. Inside was a first edition of her book, and tucked into the front cover was the original, slightly creased black business card she had been given on the rooftop of La Perla. On the back, in precise handwriting, were 3 words: "You were right." The obsession that began with a refusal to move had ended not with possession, but with a rare, respectful distance. He had let her go, but he had not forgotten her. And in doing so, he had given her the most valuable thing a man like him could offer, her own story, told in her own words without his interference. She kept the card, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that in the heart of the darkest empires, even the most dangerous men can recognize a power greater than fear. The power of a person who simply will not be moved. That simple card was more than an admission. It was an artifact from the borderland between 2 worlds, a place where obsession and respect become indistinguishable. The story of Melissa Cruz and Rafael Varga isn't just about a journalist and a cartel boss. It's a blueprint of a psychological phenomenon as old as power itself, the dangerous allure of the forbidden and the transformative shock when the expected script of dominance is ripped up and rewritten. We are fascinated by these narratives because they tap into a deep, often uncomfortable curiosity. Psychologists call it hybristophilia, an attraction to individuals who commit crimes, but it's rarely about the violence itself. It's about the magnetism of absolute confidence, the thrill of proximity to danger, and the primal, often misguided, hope that one's own strength might be the thing to finally tame the beast. Raphael's obsession didn't begin with desire, but with disbelief. Here was someone whose fear response was broken, and in that broken switch, he saw a reflection of his own abnormality. She became the ultimate puzzle. But what makes this story twist resonate is the inversion. Melissa didn't tame the beast through love or submission. She did it through superior strategy. She used the very tools of his world, information, leverage, audacity, and wielded them better. She didn't become a cartel queen, she became a cartel consultant, and then a cartel dismantler, all while filing her reports. This speaks to a deeper truth about the real women inside these organizations. They are not merely trophies or victims. As research into figures like Emma Coronel Espuro shows, they are often logisticians, money launderers, strategists, operating in what scholars term a narco-feminist space, using the patriarchal structure to gain unprecedented power. Melissa's defiance on that first night was a spark, but what turned it into a fire was her relentless competence. Raphael didn't fall for a damsel, he became fascinated by an equal, and in the end, the most shocking power move wasn't a kiss or a bullet, it was a book, and a foundation, and a returned business card. It was the creation of a new, parallel story where both could exist, changed by the other. So the next time you hear a story about a dangerous man and a woman who didn't run, look beyond the surface tension. Ask what she really saw. Ask what weapon she forged from his obsession. And ask what it says about our own world, where the lines between corrupt and legitimate power are increasingly drawn in shades of gray, and where the courage to sit in the wrong chair might be the only thing that can redesign the whole room. If you found this exploration of power, psychology, and the shadows where they meet compelling, make sure you've subscribed and hit the like button. Your support helps us dive deeper into the true stories and fascinating minds that shape our world. Thanks for listening.